Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. Analytics topics covered conversationally and sometimes with explicit language. Here are your hosts, Mo, Michael, and Tim.
It's episode 175 of the Analytics Power Hour. You know, every superhero needs a good origin story. It just makes it better. Just like every analyst comes into the profession from somewhere. Often it's a mix of where we came from that actually makes for the strongest combinations of talent. Hey, Tim, what was it you originally studied before you ended up being the quintessential analyst?
Architecture.
Yeah, architecture.
Not of the software variety, so yeah.
And Mo, you didn't start out in data and analytics initially. What was your college major?
I did criminology and political science.
Yeah, see, there you go. And I studied history and accounting. So, we've all come to this from lots of different places. And it's actually the stories of how we got here that are some of the most interesting things about our industry. Well, we wanted to share another story on this show. Someone who's got their own unique perspective and actually began to get a much deeper focus on data and analytics after being, pretty darn successful with the other things he was doing. Will Reynolds is the founder and VP of Innovation at Seer Interactive. Will founded Seer out of his living room in 2002, and today there are over 200 strong, helping clients with marketing and data solutions. Will's a frequent speaker and industry contributor. Over the years, you've probably seen him if you're in the SEO industry at the Moz conference and things like that. He's also very active in his local community of Philadelphia, helping to serve the homeless and runaway youth populations. And today, he is our guest. Welcome to the show, Will.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see your faces this morning.
Yeah. Tell us your origin story. How did you get to data? What made you, as a successful agency founder, start to focus on data and analytics so much more? And obviously we'll talk about that for quite a while, so you don't have to try to blaze through it all at once. But yeah.
Well, for me, I went to school to be a teacher. And just yesterday I tweeted something that was just like the best gift. Because when I came into an industry, and like you mentioned, I speak at all these conferences, I never thought of speaking at conferences as business development. Like, I thought it was teaching, right? So I had this freedom of just like, I'm going to share everything that I know, because that's what you do when you speak. People are like, no, like, it's BD. Like, you're supposed to come back with leads. I was like, oh, yeah. My bad. I thought this was about teaching people stuff. Shocker. But from a data standpoint, I'm still so early in my journey, Mike, that like, I'm humbled to be here because I'm really early in my data journey. Like, I think I started realizing how little data I was analyzing when I was coming up with my search strategies. And I reflected on how am I this like well-known speaker, and yet I've probably worked on 1,000 websites in my career, of which there are billions. And I've looked, I would go after like 200 keywords, and then you realize you look at a client's data and you're like, wait, they're actually targeting tens of thousands, if not millions of keywords at a time in their paid campaigns. And I'm like, okay, let me bring that over into Excel. And then you go, when you try to bring in, 4 million keywords into Excel with 50 rows or 50 columns of unique data in each one, and then you try to do a VLOOKUP to join it, you instantly realize that this is the wrong tool. And that's what got me into learning how to manipulate the data. It was a need to solve a problem that I saw in our industry that started with me. Like, I'm on stage speaking about what I know, and nobody ever just challenged me in 20 years to say, wait a second, you've worked on 1,000 websites out of billions. Like, how do you know that what you're saying isn't an anomaly?
So it was actually, that specific anecdote, was it kind of it was a volume of the data, and you were just saying, I want to do something simple. It's just the volume is such that I'm in the wrong tool. So now I need to dive into, was it SQL? Was it database?
What did you? That's a whole other story. So somebody at Seer who had only been at Seer for 6 months saw me struggling with this VLOOKUP crap in Sheets or whatever I was doing, because I share these videos. I probably share like a video every day of something that I'm working on, something I'm trying to figure out to the company. And she goes, "There's this tool called Tableau, and you can join data sets and visualize things. And another lesson, right? Like so often we in the C-suite sit off in our corners somewhere, getting all of our kudos. And here I am with somebody only 6 months out of college just teaching me about what Tableau even is. And I downloaded Tableau, but it's only a license for like 2 weeks. So I'm a CEO. I have to run the business. Like I don't have time just to like, let me just play in Tableau for 2 weeks. So literally after 2 weeks, when it says like, oh, your data needs to be in public, which it was client data, so I couldn't do that. I went and found Power BI, downloaded it, and have had it on my laptop ever since.
So, what did you think in that moment when, yeah, this young person working at the company 6 months out of university is like, hey, have you heard of it? Like, what went through your head?
Oh God, I'm so glad she's here with us. Because one, I was proud that she felt comfortable to come to the CEO of the company and say, I think I can help you when she's only 6 months out of college. Because I think a lot of times for a lot of folks, they'd be like, what do I know? Right. And I love when team members feel like they can be like, I know more than him on this. I'm going to tell him. Right. So that was the first thing I thought of is thank God I got somebody who's not afraid of the CEO. Right. Because then she would have waited 6 more months or a year before I would have learned this stuff. The real thing that clicked for me is I went, how has this become normal in our industry? How has we have data in paid and data in SEO? There is no paid only search engine and no only organic search engine, but yet no one has challenged that status quo by simply saying, if I can put a unique key search term in this table and a unique key search term in this table with rankings and put them together, I can actually more represent what the customer actually sees, which is some interplay of snippets and paid ads and all these different things. It's still to this day, I always say this, find me a tool that combines both. No one.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I was like, I think
Yeah.
people do it.
But our customers see it in one place, but the tools are built to keep us in our silos. It's crazy.
so maybe this is a little bit of a shift, but it is interesting. Like and having known you for a while and knowing that you are a creative and active like thinker and learner and teacher, and as you're talking about running the company and doing these things, I do think that one of the great things about coming in with getting all this domain knowledge and doing all the things, that are search related, that then you're using the data. When you're coming at the data, you really have, I assume, had a lot of clarity around what you were trying to do, what problems you were trying to solve, what questions you were trying to answer, which I think is actually where sometimes in the industry, especially analysts that are newer to the industry can kind of struggle, is that they want to dive into the data first. Like I would much rather have a stakeholder who comes and says, I don't know the data. I'm not a data person. I just know I need to do X. Like that's actually an easier conversation to have. A lot of times to me, it feels like there is oh, look at all the data I have. What can I do with it? And that winds up being kind of a recipe. I don't know if you feel that way. Like by the time you were digging into that, your time was so constrained. It sounds like you had things you were trying to answer or do that were really grounded in a deep knowledge of the business problems you were trying to solve. Is that
I would say
fair?
they were grounded in hypotheses that I can't see anyone answering well. So for instance, you're like, if Amazon is paying for ads and I rank number one for a keyword, like that's got to probably affect that in some way. And it has to, right? You would think like there's got to be some effect there because it's a major brand. I know I can get 2 day shipping. People skip over my result to go to Amazon because they understand what the return policy is going to be like and all that. But yet SEOs are just like, yo, if you rank number one, you're going to get 10% of the clicks. And you're like, that can't be. Like, wouldn't it be helpful if I could see how many ads were above me, if Amazon is there or a major competitor is there? And it just, you know what it is? It became an addiction after that, though, Tim, because then it became the speed that I was knocking out hypotheses, invalidating things that a year ago I said on stage as anomalies and not as something everyone should do, just became this like, oh my God, it's great. Like these ideas that I've had have been either validated or invalidated, which I also realized was like my mission. It wasn't to be right. It was to either validate or invalidate things,
Kind of
longly held beliefs, you know?
Could I just draw an observation here, which is that you're not the standard VP or CEO or lead. Like all the things you're saying, I'm like, oh my gosh, like how cool. Can I have you be my boss? Because I'm just thinking of like me marching into some of my ex-CEO's office and being like, there's a tool called Tableau. I think you should download it. And I'm not sure they would have been as receptive as you. And it sounds like, I think Tim is going to cringe when I say this, but I can't think of another way to describe it. It sounds like what drives you is, wait for it, Tim, a real growth mindset.
Oh, killing me.
But it sounds like you're so passionate about what you do, and that's what's spurring you to learn things.
Well, you know, I'm passionate about knowing when I'm wrong. You know what's so interesting is another one of my coworkers he had like a more of a background in like Python and coding. And one day, the first thing that led to me even trying to join all this data is he asked me to go head to head on his script that he built to do keyword research versus me. And what was great about that is I was like, let's do it because it has a chance to invalidate things that I talk about on stage all the time. And the script he built was so good at beating out things that people want me to come all over the world to speak about that it was another one of those moments where instantly you're like, holy smokes, I can't believe people have me come and speak at these conferences all over the world talking about how great I do keyword research when I just got my ass beat in 30 minutes by an automated script. And that was another aha moment where I think so many of us run from that because it invalidates our experience. So you're like, I've been doing this for 20 years. So like, I don't even want to see something that could be automated beat me. So then you fight it for 5 years along with everybody else, or 10 years, or however long it takes. But then for me, like that's an exciting moment. So I'll tell you, Mo, from my standpoint, I guess I'm different in that regard to come back full circle. But I started Sear when I was 25, 26. So I didn't have enough experience out there to have other managers. So this is the only way I know to be. So for me, I'm like, this is the way it is. But there's a downside, Mo. Like we're not as profitable as a lot of our other competitors because you don't have a CEO who wakes up every day looking at margins, right? Now I have a whole team that manages the business so I can focus on my part. But like you get me a data set and an Amex with no limit, and I'm dangerous.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, Mo, like we'll swap CEO roles with Rand Fishkin for like a week. I mean, Will's a little out on the tail of the normal distribution of executives. So I'm pretty sure I've never.
Can I even just zoom back to even when you started talking about your experience speaking, and you mention that, you know, the point of speaking is to share your knowledge. I think, yeah, like I feel like I'm going to end up with another professional crush by the end of this bloody episode, because I mean, that to me, that is the point of speaking, right? It's like to help share what you know. And I'm like, really, someone asked you to come back with leads? Is that a thing? But then I'm like, oh, I don't work in agencies, so maybe that's why I don't think of going to a speaking event as going to get leads. I think of it as going to learn from other people and hopefully share some stuff. But
no, so often it's considered BD. Like, because here's the thing. So people would look at me like I had 8 heads when I would say, because early on at Sear, everything was all referral all the time. So I was like, we don't do BD. We just get referrals. And people would be like, but you speak at conferences. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's got nothing to do with BD. And people would look at me like I was like a liar. They'd be like, you do BD. Like, what do you mean you don't do BD? Because they didn't process the fact that just because we get all referrals, that like I consider that to not be doing business development and just doing good work for your clients and hoping that the word spreads. But people literally kind of like they discredited me. They're like, that guy's like full of it. He's lying. He's like, like he's doing BD, but he doesn't. So then I was like, I guess this is considered business development most places, since I'm getting this visceral reaction back when I tell people I don't do BD at the time.
Is it? Yeah. I mean, I feel like if you go to, and now I want to, when I'm back to going to conferences, I almost want to do a scoring on a 2-part rubric of who is on stage. Ooh. Clearly because they are selling their, and I'm thinking specifically through.
Oh, you can
certainly in the CRO world.
Tell that though. It's who you like versus who you don't.
Well, that's the thing. I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's what it becomes. You're like, oh, they're talking through their process every time, when it's, and then we do this and then we do that. And then, oh, guess what? At the end, you can come to this link and download, all you have to do is put in your email address and you can download our toolkit, where it's like such a polished and baked, and this is like the marketing and sale. And not that the person isn't knowledgeable, but they do have that mindset versus the ones who stand up and occasionally say, well, here's where I screwed this up and that didn't work at all. Or I tried this other thing. Or you know what? 4 years ago, I stood on stage and said the complete opposite and I was dead wrong and I feel bad about it. And those are the ones that are actually more interesting to listen to. They're more memorable and you tend to feel like you've taken more away from them.
Yeah. This is why I already, Mo, have a professional crush on Will, because this is where I feel like he and I are like, how did we become like cousins or something?
How did we not earlier? How did it take so long?
Yeah, exactly. Because I just introduced myself to Will randomly like a few months ago, and I was like, hey, I want to talk to you. And he's like, I'm really busy. And I was like, please. But the very first presentation I ever did at an analytics conference, Will, was titled 10 Mistakes I've Made Analyzing the Web. And it was the #1 rated talk at that conference because all I was trying to do was help people learn from the things I did wrong. There's never not going to be somebody willing to stand up and take everybody's praise and adulation of like, oh, you're the smartest guy. I know. Thank you. Please. I'll be signing autographs later. But there's always a shortage of people who are like, hey, I've been in this work. I really love it. And I'm learning all kinds of things. And I want to share everything I've learned with you so that you can avoid my mistakes or you can be even better than you are today. Heck, this podcast, frankly, is built on some of that same thinking. Only later did we realize we were huge deals and like, so awesome. No, I'm just kidding. I can't even say it. I can't even say it with a straight face. I'm sorry. But yeah.
If you go to analyticshour.io/give me your lead contact info.
Yeah.
You can fill out a form.
So I'm trying to get this around to a question, but one of the things that I've found is that I've definitely felt like I'm not normal. And I think Will kind of like in a similar way that you've said it. But over time, I've found this way to align sort of like, yeah, when you speak at a conference, I don't think of it as business development, but I don't not let it be business development. It's just I'm going to do it the way I do it. And if people want to be clients after that, well, cool. That's pretty awesome. And let's explore that. But I don't know, like, as you were going along, Will, like you obviously had a lot of data that you were looking at as you were looking at search rankings and things like that. So what was the switch? Because you're doing data analysis on a certain level, but that was, I think you would say that that's not you being a data person. I don't know. How would you describe the difference between those two things? Because it sounds like you were already doing data work pretty consistently throughout.
Yeah, but it was so basic, right? It was like, addition versus like, I'll stop at algebra because I didn't do anything after that. But, here's what's interesting. I love simple. I love simple. I love when simple is just in front of you, right? Somebody shows you something so simple and you're like, how am I going through the world not realizing this? So there's a guy named Stefan Bajayo from Conductor, and he and I once were just riffing, but he really was the one leading this on like, we have to find out where you rank on Google, unless you use like one of their tools to do it, but don't do that. When you find out where you rank on Google, a scraper is basically going through the entire search results and looking for your domain and saying, oh, you rank number 4. Oh, you rank number 10. So it's got to scrape the entire set of results. And one day, Stefan was like, nobody considers this data as intelligence. They consider it as a singular data point in a place and time. So we start riffing. And I'm like, holy smokes. Google has invested billions of dollars in research to make sure that that search result understands what users want better than anyone else at scale, instantaneously, yada, yada, yada. So every time you scrape it, you are taking pennies on the dollar for what Google had to invest billions of dollars to learn about what they've learned that is the right answer for this person at this time, right? So last night, very late, I was up and we took 1 million domains, and by we, somebody else in my company who knows Python, took 1 million domains and looked for add.txt at the end of all of them. And then I applied that million rows to this like 400 million row set of ranked data with domains. And now I can, across my entire client database, say, oh, which keywords has Google determined that publishers with the ads.txt are the right answer at scale? So now when I go back to a client, I can go, do you know that 80% of all of this group of search terms that you spent join to your paid data, so you spent this much on these words and got this many conversions. Is that good? They go, yeah. I go, but what's interesting is 82% of all the search results are publishers. So that tells us something about how we might need to write the content to compete. And then over time, as Google's machines learn, you start watching them be like, publishers aren't the right answer. Oh, this is the right answer. So when you keep scraping that data month in, month out, you start to be able to track how Google is learning about what answers this question for this person better than anyone else does for literal pennies on the dollar. So once you start seeing a Google scrape as intel, you start doing things like this. Show me all of my SaaS clients where a map is showing up in the top 4 results. Why would I do that? Because a map is a local result. They're a software business. Somehow Google's targeting incorrectly and spending money, right? So my client is spending money on a word that the odds of a map being the right answer are completely false. So like that's the kind of thing that you do when you start looking at all those related searches, all those people also asks. You start saying to yourself, wait, Google has seen your search, your click, how long you stayed on that site, if you came back or not, what you clicked on next, how long you stayed on that site, and all that's being learned on over 20 years of click patterns to determine this site never answers the question well, so don't follow it. So to me, that was the aha moment. Like I was like, oh my God, this is intelligence that I can use in so many different places that it just blows my mind.
Yeah, go back to it's the curiosity and the creative thinking and the what if are all the. I mean, I think that's where there's kind of like the Will Reynolds beautiful mind part of always like asking and learning and then saying
teaching. It's teaching,
yeah,
dude, right? Like you're always trying to learn. You're trying to learn and teach at the same time. And Tim, I'll give you another example just so that people can understand the power of what you can do with this data. So this is basics, but like I can't do any of this. Like I have to get much smarter people around me to do it, but I have the ideas. And then I go, can somebody help me, please? COVID hits, right? First time COVID hits. So clients are freaking out, like freaking out. We took in about a week, every search term for every client over like a 12-month, no, it was 6 weeks before COVID hit before, and 6 weeks after we had gotten used to this new reality. Because you have to think COVID changed a lot of stuff in our lives. And our clients were freaking out and they didn't have good answers because nobody had been through this before. So what do we all do? We base it off of gut and bullshit, right? And I'm like, no, we're going to go get some data. Where do I have data that can make me answer this question better than how every other person with 20 years of experience is going to go at it? And I said, I got every freaking search term for every client in this data warehouse. So I said, can somebody engram every search term for every client, then rejoin back all the paid data at the individual engram level. So each piece of each word. So if the word is, Samsung mobile phone, each engram is Samsung is an engram, mobile, and phone. So then we stitched all the data back together and we said, which search terms increased the most in impressions after this 6-week change? And you started seeing little pieces of words added to other words that showed potential change in how customers searched, right? So our biggest finding was for about 3 weeks after COVID hit, when we got used to this, oh my God, this is a pandemic, it's a real thing. The word that people most used associated with, not most, a word that had a big lift was FDIC associated with our banking clients' words. Because for 3 weeks, people were more worried about the safety of their money than they were worried about the rates that you were offering. So then, because I'm scraping the results, I get to ingest all the ads and find out where is no one speaking the language of the customer. The customer changed. and we can go, oh, we're scraping all those ads in. So now we can see none of our competitors are speaking their language, but the customers change their language. So now can we make better ads right now and get that information back out to our clients? Because that's running a data warehouse, instead of trying to do that bullshit in Sheets and downloading CSVs and whatnot, we did it for every client and recorded a video for each client in our company within a week. 5 of us were just like, we're sitting in a room, we're going to record a video, like, these words are jumping, these words are falling off, this is happening in your da 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 da. And it's like, that's the power of this data thing that I'm on now. So obviously then I got hooked. And then I would start to look at like Google Trends to see if it validated these spikes. And you'd be like, oh shit, it did spike. Like, so you're like, this is right. I think this is right. I've now validated it to the best that I can. And like, for me, like, that's another example of the data that we have, and we have a lot of it. It's just so easy to reshape it and then turn it into instant client value, especially at this time. So now that COVID's popping back up again in the United States and pretty much across the world, we already have all that done. So now we can just refresh that, change the date ranges, and now we'll start to see how people are changing their language again to see if it matched like it did last time. But that's customer intelligence, right? It's instant customer intelligence. And people put things in Google they would never put on Facebook, and they would never answer in your surveys. So like, we get to understand things like the word transmission. I have a client in the auto space. The word transmission changed when COVID hit.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you started being like, why is the CDC showing up for transmission words? And you're like, oh, got it. That's an outlier. That's Google's intelligence. So that when you scrape the results, you're literally saying, why is a medical site showing up? It hasn't showed up in 3 years, 4 years, or any point in my data set. Why did it show up this week? Oh my God, Google is actually looking at transmission words so broadly because people are worried about transmission of COVID, that is causing my client to maybe get matched. Literally the word transmission at one point ranked at number 10 on Google for the CDC's website, not for things related to your automotive transmission.
Okay, but you've got to explain to me, Will. It sounds like there was this real journey, and I'm not going to, like, the work you're doing sounds so fascinating. I'm like hanging off every single like row of every column. How did you go through this as a business? Like, you talked about at the start of COVID, there was like 5 of you that got in a room. You talk about importing this data from the data warehouse. So at some point, the Google Sheet or the whatever wasn't working. And so now you've got a team at work, there's a data warehouse. Like, what was the evolution? And I feel like there might be some path to SQL for you as well on this trip.
It was quick. It was really quick because once you see it, that's the beauty of owning the business. When I see good shit, like, I don't have to go ask somebody if we can go drop $1 million on it, right? So I saw it and I was like, this is just a better way. It was just a better way. And once you instantly go, this is a better way, you can't have, so Sear, because we're a high referral business, we got to be like Starbucks. We got to taste the same everywhere because your clients come back in over time. And then if you have big discrepancies between how your teams execute, it's like, I thought I was getting that. That's why I came back. So then another thing, and I realized that my team was all over the place before. Our whole history has been like a bunch of hacker types. So what happens is each person kind of does their thing their own little way. But our client base was like, I don't want that. Like, why can't you guys just do it the same way every time? So also by warehousing this data, it enabled us to be able to take a hypothesis for one client, see if it's true across the entire client data set. And that was all some people smarter than me. Like, it was just me leaning on the shoulders of team members that had been with me for 8, 9, 10 years who had pivoted their careers into more data engineering, Python, etc. And I go, can you set this up? Can you set that up? Can you set this up? But eventually I did learn SQL because I hypothesize all the time and I hated being on someone else's schedule. So I was that CEO that was like, hey, I'm looking at this table and I'm wondering if this. But the data lakes were so big that I couldn't bring them all into Power BI. So I had to cut them down to actually hypothesize, or my files would just take forever to run or it would crash my laptop. So then I was like, oh, well, I don't want to be on your schedule, Mo. Like, I don't want to be on your schedule, right? Like, what if I have an idea on a Saturday at 8 a.m. that I want to work on? I don't want to have to send it as an idea and wait till Monday, because by Monday I might find out that it was completely invalid. So then I went to community college and just started taking SQL classes, not to get good at SQL, but to at least do, select, where, like, and a couple of basic things to build some basic tables to validate my hypotheses. Because I'm addicted to hypothesis validation and invalidation. Like, it's just so much fun to be like, oh my God, look how wrong I was. Like, right? Or damn, I knew it. Right? And anything that gets in the way of that is frustrating for me.
And was that the case before you, I guess, had this data pivot, if you allow the pun, or was the hypothesis validation always there, and it's just become like your methods have changed about how you validate or invalidate now?
It was always there. It was always there. And you know what's interesting is I think Mike was mentioning earlier about speaking at a conference or something and getting great ratings. So it's so interesting because also that's something somebody asked me a question yesterday about speaker order, and I'll tell you, as people that speak, it pulled something out of me I never thought of, which is if you speak last or towards the end of a day, people have somebody to compare you against. So when you get your ratings, if it's a conference that rates you in kind of real time, if you're the first, second, third person to go, you can't really use those ratings as well to get better because they haven't had a chance to compare you to anybody. So anyway, that's a little speaking hack that I was not expecting to bring up. So I've always been the kind of person that just enjoys validating and invalidating my hypotheses. It's like fun to see how wrong you are on something, like to discover the world in a way where you're like, oh my freaking God, how have I gone through the world seeing this? And to be on stage speaking and have all these great speaker ratings, right? So the data that I have says that I'm pretty good at it. And then to go back into your own data and be like, I was so wrong. Like I was so wrong. Like how can I be rated that well and be so wrong on so many things? For me was like, it was a joy because I live on being a rookie. I live on being a person who is like in something new and learning it for the first time versus I think we have to be careful because sometimes your ego just gets filled off all these speaker ratings and shit, right? So it like feels great. But when everybody's telling you crushed it, nobody's telling you a better way to do something. Right. And then that makes you feel better. So then you don't go out and seek the people who are telling you you're doing it all wrong. And to be able to do that for myself was insanely valuable.
Let's step aside for a minute. You know, something that gets in the way of every great analysis, potentially poor quality data. You know, seeing your analysis get put aside because it doesn't have credibility in the data is just a continuing problem for data analysts, data scientists everywhere. Mo and Tim, what have you done when your career's about this? Or what could be done to resolve that?
Well, using a platform like our sponsor, ObservePoint, to put the machines to use to actually check the integrity of the data across your entire website is definitely one way to go.
And I'm not going to lie, the best bit is that you can get alerts when something goes wrong.
That means checking across your most important pages, user paths, making sure the functionality, the data collection that you are expecting is actually getting collected.
And let's be real, I get pretty excited about being able to track data quality and QA progress over time. So yeah, it's for the win.
I love it. And you can love it too. You can get a demonstration of all of ObservePoint's data governance capabilities at observepoint.com/analytics power hour. Go check them out, learn more about ObservePoint. All right, let's get back to the show.
It also seems like as you're the chasing where you're wrong, or that cycle of, gee, I've stood up on stage and there is a degree of being clear and concise and an effective communicator and telling a good story. There can be lots of things that get told. I mean, there are political pundits who say things and it's actually, if you're not really paying careful attention and catching the logical fallacies, you can understand why people say, wow, they just started at A.
That's true.
And ended up at 14. Like they didn't even follow the alphabet, but it was a good narrative. And so I think there are lots of things in the industry where that has come about. I mean, my current one is we continue to obsess about attribute. Like we took a wrong turn 20 years ago on attribution, thinking that tracking user level data, we could just crunch the data and get attribution. To me, that's like one of my biggest ahas in the last 12 months was, oh my God, we took a wrong turn and have been chasing that for 20 years. And even though I've been kind of anti-multi-touch attribution or the way that it gets pursued, it's only been more recently that I've realized exactly how fundamentally problematic that was. But to get back around to saying I've stood on stage within the last 3 years, and I mean there's one out there that thankfully it was not recorded. Like I'm embarrassed with what I stood up, and it was well regarded, well rated. I think they rated it. People were excited. I felt pretty clever because it was something that was kind of a new idea, but it was dead wrong. But I think that's actually when you say, oh, I found something that was wrong, but you know what? I'm a sharp person. I was trying to do the right thing. I was thinking creatively. I maybe even talked about it. I organized my thoughts well enough to teach others this. Oops. I taught them that the world was flat. Now it's actually more powerful because I'm like, wait a minute. Other people think this and I can understand why they thought this and it's wrong. But now it's actually more fun and powerful and useful to say, yeah, I was there. Like I thought the world was flat. Now let me help navigate you through why the world is not flat because I've found something else. So I think there is a point to that is you keep saying you love finding out that you're wrong. Well, when you were wrong, it wasn't because you were being lazy or stupid. It was because you were following a logical path to something. And then it's only been like the other missing piece that you plugged in, which means lots of people haven't found that missing piece. So now I'm talking in abstractions to, I guess, protect the innocent, except for multi-touch attribution. Anyone who's out there, anybody who's out there is expounding on time decay attribution is should be flogged.
Well, one of the things I don't know if you're touching on this there, but the promise of data and like how trackable things were back when we all started, right? Like, this idea of like, every single person, you can track them and they can do this and you can do this and that. It's funny to realize how much of a farce that was. And we just thought that the data would get more robust over time. And then it just got more fragmented. It got like, there was mobile devices and it's like, oh, well, there's a way to round that. And then it just kept being like, wait, maybe we need to stop believing in this promise we were told 20 years ago that you're going to be able to track Tim Wilson through your website and know it was him and know that he clicked on these 5 pages and blah, 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 blah. And, that was always the promise is that this data, digital would provide all this data that would help us make better decisions. And it does. But I think the way it was sold was like, you will know this person at this time bought this thing from you because of these reasons. And it's never ended up being true. And the one thing I love about the whole cookie deletion issue and ad blocking and all that crap is it just shone a light on something. And I think a lot of us were like, ooh, wait a second. Like, that's what I was promised when I was 20 years old and started in this industry, that like someday it's all going to be trackable. And it's like, thank God. And it never happened in 20 years, right? It got better, but it never happened. But the promise was always the same, that if you had all this data, you would just get answers. And then you're like, wait, actually getting that data from people and finding insights is really fucking hard.
Yeah,
really hard.
Well, that is made that now because of the world we're in with the cookies and regulations. There are people. There's a whole cottage industry around. Let's come up with technological workarounds for that because it's still chasing that fallacy that there's a way to get to all that. So there are two parts. You're never going to get there, and it's getting worse. And also, even if you had all of it, there's still some big gaps. Like there's a reason that like A/B testing actually gets you to causation. So that's this other monster fallacy. But I get that the allure of if I can just come up with, I can teach people about how to work around ITP. And it's like, well, one, that's definitely going to be a short term. Whatever fix you come up with, if you are explicitly or implicitly saying 100%. It's a workaround, it may feel technically like you're doing things, but you're just rearranging deck chairs on a barge that never made it into the water, much less the Titanic. So, sorry, that just headed me down.
No, preach. I'm sitting here like in my mind, preach. Like,
but it's. I mean, I actually have slides that I'm using in a few places that are around that very rant that you just had. I mean, some of the exact same phrases around a farce. Like I've said that. So, but I was there, like same thing. I was there 5 years, 10 years ago. I was chasing that too. Let's just connect all this stuff together. That's the promised land. And only now as people are wringing their hands and gnashing their teeth about we're losing that. You're losing visibility you never had at a great spot anyway. You had your bounce rate to 3 decimal points, but forget about the validity of a bounce rate. You actually were missing things anyway. So,
you know what? Like one of those things for me is paid search performance. And we're starting to look at like how our competitor campaigns perform when they get bad news. right? Like if your company gets panned as being a bad company, it typically hurts you for some amount of time. It's in the news, people are thinking about it. And it's like there's all these models being run, right? But like most models that I see on like, hey, this is how we attribute paid, never go, we brought in the news results to see whether or not you had some bad news at that time. And maybe that's why your freaking shit didn't convert as well, because you ripped off a bunch of students, Wells Fargo, right? And gave them student loans that they didn't know they had. That's why you're right. So like, but this is happening across the internet, and we have this, and that's what happens, right, Tim, is we sit in a room, we have all this data, and we're like, yeah. And this is another thing about data, right? It's like, you're like, yeah. And then some exec will be like, wasn't that the same week that the website went down and had problems? And you're like, oh, I didn't have that anywhere. And then you go and run off and get that data. And then you show it to another person and they go, wasn't that the week that we did TV ads? You're like, I don't have that in my, okay, then where is that data? What's the schema like? Can I get it? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, we were doing billboards at that time in that state. Like, well, do you have the latitude and longitude of all the billboards? Well, no. And it's like, it just becomes this like chase of the data, and you realize you're never going to get there. So the earlier you can give up on it, the better.
But so, Will, how do you make decisions then? Like when you're in the driver's seat, like how do you not end up in that spiral?
I'm very comfortable with saying this is the best information I have at the time to make a decision on that I have to right now. And then I also say, what's the fatality of this decision if I'm wrong? I analyze everything through upside and downside, literally everything. So as a result, I'm like, what's the downside if I'm wrong? What's the upside if I'm right? And once I'm honest about those things with myself, it makes it very easy for me to make decisions in a world where with a lot of imperfect answers. It's very easy for me to make decisions because I'm not a doctor. Right? Like you don't want me doing surgery because I'm like, yeah, I've always wondered what happens if you slice that part. Oh.
See, and in that statement, Will, I think you've actually given us a peek into something, which is I think you've been a data person all along. Because the framework for making those decisions, like that's using data. Like, I don't know. Like, I think you've been a data person that just learned SQL over COVID. I think you've been a data person. So, I don't know. I hear you say that, and it's like, that's brilliant. Like, people should take that one thing if you're a decision maker and just sort of like pick two vectors. Like, is this the best information I have? And what is the fatality? I love the way you said that, of this decision. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen with this decision? And use that as a framework. I have studied decision making a little bit, and my old boss, Mike Gustafson, he actually maintains a decision journal, right? Where he writes down, like, here's the decisions I made under what circumstances. And then he goes back and looks. And it's like, wow, was that a really good decision or was that like a not so good decision? Like, so I aspire to that someday, but like, that's who taught me about it. But this is exactly how that gets done. And I think to be effective, at any level of leadership or as you grow in your career, learning how to try to make decisions just like you described is probably one of the most important things you can learn to do. And it's interesting because I sort of feel like I'm like, wait a second, you've been a data person all along.
Well, but honestly, though, you know what, though? And I know that you'll be like, no, Will, you shouldn't look at it that way. But when I think of data people, like there's been so many times I wanted to support something that Tim was doing. And then I would watch it and be like, oh, shit. Like, oh man, like you literally are showing up for a friend of yours, somebody who you respect and have learned so much from. Because you want to show love, you want to show support, and you're like, oh man, I can't get any of this. Like, it's so far over my head. So when I think of data people, I look at like some of the work that Tim does sometimes and what he talks about, and I'm like, I ain't never gonna be that. So I think the people I compare myself to, like to me, Tim's a data person. I'm a guy with data.
I know exactly how you feel. That's exactly
I am a guy with data. I am not a data person.
Except I'd been a data person for years the first time we met, and I wasn't talking about any of the R type stuff. You and I wound up having beers and talking about hypotheses and measuring performance and
that's why I fell in love with you. Like literally, I was like, I hope this man's not married. Damn it. because what you broke down in that moment for me was this amazing simplicity of hypothesizing. And I kid you not, Tim, it gets referenced in my company once a month because I have it on an auto repeat to come back into my inbox every month to look at that presentation and ground myself again in how to structure hypotheses. That's how good it is. And you gave that presentation like 6 or 7 years ago. Like I had it come in my inbox every month to remind me to ground myself. And like, this is how you think about, I have the document, like I have it linked and you know it, Tim, because every like
You
4 or
tweet
5
it.
months, I tweet it. And I'm like, this is still the best way to get your people thinking about hypotheses.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you were off on some R shit, and I was like, oh man, like I can't hang with that. Like I can't. I'm trying to understand it. I know there's smarts in there, but like it's brain game. I'm like, I'm trying to still make sure that where select star where from like works 90% of the time. So I'm just like. But that's the beauty, right? It's the swirling of these different perspectives that help us to make our own, which I think is the beauty, right? Like, I might not be able to take that part from
Let me tell you how many leads I got out of that presentation. No, I was not fishing for that. I was actually trying to agree with Michael that I think, Will, you've been a data person all along.
No, but that's real. Like, you know me, Tim, by this point. Like, I don't sit up here and tell people shit that I don't believe because I'm going to forget it all. And then I'm going to have to, like, you're going to say something. I'm be like, I said that? Oh, I must have just said that to be nice. That was not to be nice. It is a tool that I use to try to ground myself first and then also my team and like hypothesize. And we should link to it in the show notes or whatever. It's like so good.
Yeah, it is good. And you know what? Well, I reference it all the time, too. So you're not alone. Exactly. All right, it's that new segment. It's time for the Conductrix Quiz. Mo, are you ready to represent our listener in a battle to the quizzical death?
To the prize? Yeah.
To the prize. Tim, are you ready?
Never. I will maintain.
Well, Conductrix is always ready to help you elevate your A/B testing programs and experiments and run effective experimentation programs. They partner with you in ways that typical vendors seem to not. And then for over a decade, they're the partner in A/B testing and personalization the largest companies have teamed up with to work on A/B testing, contextual bandits, predictive targeting, always providing honest feedback and going beyond expectations to achieve testing and experimentation goals. They're our sponsor for this segment. Let's talk about who you're representing. So, Mo, you're representing someone who is a near and dear person to the podcast and honestly the analytics industry here in the United States, Jared Riley Smith.
G'day, Jared.
Ooh.
Yeah, and Tim, you're representing someone who I think you know, and I'm going to mispronounce his last name because I always do, Jim Gianolio.
Jim Genolio?
Genolio.
Yeah.
See, there's a lot of extra vowels, and sorry, Jim. Anyways, so let's get into it. Here is the question. It's probably fair to say that a lot of the people who call themselves data scientists these days favor Bayesian methods. They're easily spotted in the wild, conversing about updating their priors after learning something new rather than just saying, I learned something new. Anyway, interestingly, while Thomas Bayes is credited with the idea of Bayes' theorem, much of the early formalization of what we think of as Bayesian statistics was done by Pierre-Simon Laplace in the late 1700s. Oh. That's not even the question. All right, so here's the question. Mo and I are at some analytics conference, maybe in Budapest, and we overhear someone talking knowingly in a group of people near us. It is Tim. We hear him say in a voice loud enough so that everyone in earshot can hear, well, I guess my throbbing headache is from that red wine we had last night. Turns out my posterior probability of a headache after red wine isn't close to what I figured it was last night. I guess, and at this point he raises his voice just a bit louder to ensure everyone can hear. I don't write the questions, folks. I need to update my priors going forward. What did Tim mean by posterior probability? Is it A, the conditional probability, B, the total probability, C, the marginal probability, D, the joint probability, or E, the naive probability?
Oh, good
Let me know if you
Lord.
need those again.
I think the thing is, I know what they all mean separately, but in mat language,
It does take it out of that.
it's confusing somehow.
Okay, rattle off what they...
All right, so we want to know what Tim
Marginal.
meant by posterior probability. So is it conditional probability?
And
A.
I said loudly that I needed to update my posterior probability.
Yeah, I need to update my priors going forward. But what you said before was my throbbing headaches from red wine. Turns out my posterior probability of a headache after red wine isn't close to what I figured it was last night.
Okay.
So conditional probability, total probability, marginal probability, joint probability, and naive probability. I think you
down
can
to-
probably get rid of a couple of those, I'm guessing.
I think we can eliminate naive because I think that's a naive Bayes thing. I think naive is
Okay.
not, but and I don't think it's. You want to eliminate one, Mo? Well, actually, can we start off with? Did we do that? The elimination? Am I correct that I can eliminate naive?
Let's say that you can eliminate E, the naive probability.
Okay.
It would not be naive to assume that.
I think there's another one I could eliminate, but do you want to
The
try
problem is, I only listened to the ones that I thought it was. I didn't listen to the ones that it wasn't. So now I don't know what the third one is. I only know what
The
two
third one is the marginal probability. So
Oh no,
conditional-
I know marginal and joint. What were the other two answers?
Oh, conditional probability, total probability,
Total.
marginal, and joint.
I've never
I
heard
can-
total. That's I mean, like, I'm familiar
Okay.
with joint
Yeah.
and conditional and marginal, but total, I've
Well,
not
you're doing
heard.
better than I would have done on this, Mo. So you're cruising.
so okay, so we can eliminate. Let's eliminate total. Let's say we can eliminate total,
Sure. Let's
And then-
eliminate
and then-
total.
and then I want to eliminate joint, which means if I can't eliminate it, then Mo wins. But I want to eliminate joint probability.
You want to eliminate joint probability.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that because that leaves you with two options.
Right, and then Mo has to actually take the next shot at which one she thinks it is.
Oh, so then Mo will guess the next option? Are you sure
Yeah.
you're fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility to Jim Gianolio?
the fact is, he knows what the correct answer is.
Yeah, I was going to
'cause
say,
the guy
Jim
has
probably does know the answer.
He absolutely does.
Jim's like, I want to represent myself.
So,
All right, I'll allow it. We'll exclude. Which one did you say you wanted to exclude?
joint
Probability. Yep.
Yeah.
So that one is gone. So we have eliminated all but conditional and marginal probabilities.
And so
Mo?
he's calculating the posterior that he's going to be hungover after drinking red wine.
He's updating. Yeah. What did he mean by posterior probability? At this point, it's a 50-50. You've got two options.
I think it's marginal, but I feel like a moron because it seems really easy, but there isn't another condition. It's like he's hungover or he's not.
Yeah, I don't think it's
Well, it's
condition-
about
I don't think it's
the
conditioned on the red.
likelihood of being hungover is what he's trying to measure, I think.
That's the question: is whether it's conditioned on the red wine or if it's supposed to be conditioned on the something else. But
That's why, anyway. Fine. I'll go with marginal. Tim can go with conditional.
All right, Mo has selected C, the marginal probability. Tim, are you comfortable going with A?
I'm as uncomfortable as I was at the very beginning before I even knew this was coming from the mind of Matt Kershaw,
And it does come from
which
the
is
mind
extremely
of
not.
Matt Kershaw.
So yes,
The correct answer is A, the conditional probability.
Knew it.
Yes, one can use the law of total probability and the multiplication rule to relate the conditional, joint, and marginal probabilities to one another.
oh, well,
Tim, can you
Almost
explain
O.
it?
So,
this is where you've got a P and a H and a something else, and you actually are actually combining them. It's how you're looping back into the beginning that I'm still not exactly sure what the condition is, but I think that's how you're actually closing the loop. And maybe the total probability would cover all conditions. I don't know. The more I talk, this is bringing up, I actually was reading like a book that was like the history of like like Bayes' theorem, the most underrepresented.
Of course you were.
I didn't make. This was a couple years ago. I learned nothing about Bayes, but I remember Laplace being captured in that. And
I've heard that word as well before, Laplace. And now is the time to wrap up the Conductrix quiz. If you want to learn more about Conductrix, go check out their website at conductrix.com and see how they might be able to help you with your A/B testing and experimenting programs. They can definitely help you with some of your statistics. Congratulations, Jim. You're the winner. Jared, I'm sorry you didn't prevail this time, but keep submitting the sticker requests or reach out to us on Twitter if you want to be entered for a chance to win. And we'll keep doing the quiz, and we'll keep having... I have to update my priors, frankly, every time we do a quiz because we keep having to change. Anyway, let's get back to the show. All right, we do have to start to wrap up, although I feel like we could just start a whole second show at this point of just being like, let's tell stories and have a fun, like, campfire. But this is the way the world works, so we do have to start to wrap up. But really great discussion. It probably is worth noting, if you've been listening and you've been hearing what kind of person Will is and things like that, you could go check out their website. They are actually hiring for a lot of roles. So not for nothing, but I figured I'd give that little plug. A lot of people listen to this show and frankly find a lot worse places to work than Sear if you just take my word for it. All right. One thing we do on the show is a last call. And that is just something we go around the horn and share with our listener audience. It's something we find might be interesting for them or for their community. So, Will, you're our guest. Do you want to share a last call?
I got two. So can I last call? I heard that's cool. I heard Tim does this often. So
Tim does this all the time. So totally allowed.
Most impactful book I've read as an analyst is a book called Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me. Really good book.
Interesting.
And what it does is it shows how we trick ourselves into believing data because we're going into it with a bias. So my favorite example in there is around a doctor called Dr. Semmelweis in 1850. He determined that we should wash our hands when we do procedures. And he found that out by realizing that, women were dying during childbirth in the 1850s. And they were the ones that were from students who were working on cadavers and then going and delivering babies and not washing their hands in between. And he presented that information to the Vienna Medical Society. They fought him for like 15 years on that data. And all he was saying was, if we washed our hands, we would have saved women's lives. And what we learned from that is doctors would have had to admit to themselves that they actually had killed women by not washing their hands. So it was easier to fight the data. And this book is full of examples where people are like, DNA evidence, prosecute. This DNA evidence found out that this guy is innocent. Nah, keep him in jail. And you're like, how does that happen? How do you use the exact same thing and the exact same science to come up with different outcomes based on what your bias is telling you? And that book just really makes you look internally. So that's one thing. And the other thing is in November, around November, I think 15th or so, I'll be doing my a sleep out for homeless youth in Philadelphia. And I think we've raised probably over the last 10 years I've been doing this, like around like $150,000, $160,000. But I'm going to do it again. Last year I raised 43. And now that I deleted my Facebook, I'm going to have less reach. So I'll use this last call to tell people, if you follow me, please follow me at least through November so that you can donate when I put my links up. Because, I've literally listened to and worked with kids who've been kicked out of their homes in the winter because they're gay or LGBTQ or their parents don't like them. They have nowhere to go. And I think that's a problem that we should all want to be a part of solving. So I would love support from that if anybody's willing to support me, because I'll be tweeting about it a lot when we get closer to November. Thank you.
Outstanding. Wow. Thank you. Mo, what about you? What's your last call?
So a friend shared with me a blog post from Farnham Street, which, they have like a bunch of articles and stuff like that I've been kind of trawling through. This is like, I don't know, it's a bit weird, but there's a Nobel Prize winning biologist, I think he won it in the 70s, Peter Medawar, and he wrote a book called Advice to a Young Scientist, which I don't recommend reading because it sounds really long. But the Farnham Street blog did a really nice kind of like, here are the key concepts of the book, which I don't know. it kind of made me feel good and kind of got me like a bit in touch with, I suppose, some of the values and like the moral dilemmas that you come up against. And I don't know, it's just like a friend shared it for me as like a bit of a light read, and I just kind of enjoyed it. And yeah, it reminded me of my younger self and my curiosity. And yeah, anyway, that's it.
I'd like to recommend
Nice.
Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace.
No.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
Definitely don't read that either.
Tim, what about you?
So I'm going to do kind of two half last calls. One, it has it's always fun to talk to you because of your energy and thinking. So I'm going to do a last call that literally just Googling and Will's with 1L, Will Reynolds, and then clicking on the videos and then just randomly watching one. There's stuff that goes back years that are always thought provoking and fun and entertaining. It is why I could sit for 4 hours and listen to Will talk. And then the second, I'll just be silly. So, we have this new branding and we do have a store, and it's a Zazzle store because we put no research into it like 5 years ago. So it's not a great user experience. It's not great pricing, but we do have all the branded merch like updated. So just think like we're probably at least 12 months out before realizing that we always hated the current branding. So now is the time to get your analytics, to get the maximum life out of the currently branded merch. There's some tiny little percentage goes to my daughter's college fund. We have yet to hit the $100 minimum of those to even get an initial payout going back on that. But it's there. I'm drinking out of my Analytics Power Hour coffee mug, which is we're recording. So check that out. Or for free, we do have stickers. I think we mentioned this on the last show as well. Those are totally free if you go to bit.ly/APH-stickers, or there's a link, I think, in the FAQ on analyticshour.io. So get your merch, help us spread the word about the podcast. And also absolutely feel free to tweet at us with miserable aspects of your e-commerce experience, because frankly, we're not making money with our merch. So ripping an e-commerce experience would be entertaining, and we'd address anything that we can, but it won't be much because it's just a Zazzle store. What about you, Michael?
Well,
top that. I set the bar low.
I will top. Well, I'll do my best. So I actually wanted to share, just really briefly, the thing that actually made me reach out to you, Will, in person a few months back in the first place, because I obviously have known about you for a long time. We both know people who, but you and I have never spoken up until a few months ago. And the reason I emailed you in the first place was a couple of articles you wrote about what does it mean to live a life of enough as an agency owner, as someone who has had a lot of success. And you spell it out in pretty good detail in 2 blog posts about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that was what made me finally say, I need to talk to this guy because I'm trying to myself build a company. And what wisdom could I get from someone who's already done most of this journey and could maybe share with me things and so that was actually what did it. But if you're someone who's interested in any aspects of sort of business and entrepreneurship or being a CEO, I highly recommend those 2 articles to you. So sorry, Will, you to put up with that, but that's just it. You write this stuff and you put it out
unless
there.
You really want to be a Silicon Valley tech bro, and then Will is not going to be your guiding light on that front.
No,
so.
Daddy needs a 5th Porsche at his 4th house.
Yeah, I mean,
so why don't you work 80 hours this week, buddy?
That's kind of the yes. So that was the first one. Second one is, in about a month, we are going to be having the Digital Analytics Association 1 conference. So it's our annual conference. Last year, because of COVID, obviously it was all virtual. This year, who knows? Because, when we're recording this versus a month from now when this comes out, what's going to be the case. But right now we're planning to be in person. This is actually more of a personal thing. I'm planning on being there, and I would love to see you there because I just love hanging out with analytics people, and we'll do all the right things and wear masks and be vaccinated and all those things. But if you can make it to the 1 conference, I think you will love the speaker lineup this year. And I think you'll have a great time. So
I'll be there, and I'll be ranting about the thing that Will and I just went back and forth about a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
there you go.
I will absolutely use the word farce as part of my.
There you
my
go.
talk.
Perfect. All right. Well, this has been a great discussion. Obviously, we'd love to hear from you. We're available out on the Measure Slack group, on Twitter, or our LinkedIn group. So please reach out to us. You can actually order stickers for free, so you don't have to go to our store. So you do it at bit.ly/aph-stickers, and you can order some stickers. We can send those out to you. And you can see on Twitter, sometimes people will, they're actually getting pretty good times through to Europe. We've had a few people get them in about a week. So that's pretty amazing. That's Tim Wilson. Tim Wilson of the U.S.
working the warehouse
and the Postal Service.
my weekend job.
The fulfillment center.
Yeah.
Anyways, we appreciate all of that you do on the Tim, and obviously we also appreciate our producer Josh Crowhurst. This is going so smoothly. Mo's like, why? Anyway, we'd love to hear from you, and remember, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or you're the 20-year-old kid who just learned about Tableau. The one thing you can do is you can be a hypothesis assassin like Will Reynolds and keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going with your comments, suggestions, and questions on Twitter at @AnalyticsHour, on the web at analyticshour.io, our LinkedIn group, and the Measure Chat Slack group. Music for the podcast by Josh Crowhurst.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Analytics. Oh my God, what the fuck does that even mean?
This is turning out, we're on a record pace here. Tim's been flipped off twice already.
And we haven't even started. Rock, flag, and hypothesis assassons. That's actually a nice Philly.
Oh yeah, that's a Philly reference.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a whole "It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia" thing. Sorry.
You guys are great.
I can't tell if you're in that, if you don't laugh, you'll cry phase, or if you're genuinely laughing.
No, that was horrible, is what it was. That's what that was. I'm embarrassed for you.